Doomscrolling. It gets the best of us. I imagine most of you watching have had to pull yourself out of a doom scroll, your brain eating up the strangely addictive flavor of the latest bit of social media drama, climate disaster, or international clusterfuck. That used to be me, and honestly sometimes still is. But recently I saw a YouTube video from Sean McRae on how he replaced his doom scrolling with the Switch 2. And I realized that not only had I started to do the same myself, but I was going a step further. I was replacing my doom scrolling with escapism in general. My name is Joe Bauer, an American immigrant and writer in Berlin, and I'm going to share with you what happened once I started replacing my doom scrolling with escapism and what escapism means to me. But first, since everything needs an origin story these days, here's how I got hooked on doom scrolling. I was in Berlin when Russia launched their full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. We didn't know what could happen or how much Putin would be willing to escalate things. Was he going to launch us into World War III? Did we need to pack a go bag? Is there enough space for us at our Norwegian friend's farmhouse if shit really hits the fan? Seeing as Germany isn't far from Ukraine in the grand scheme of things, I thought that I needed to be informed of every single update as it happened, just to be safe. I read absolutely everything I could. I even turned on notifications for tweets from specific news outlets to make sure I knew what was happening as soon as it happened. Needless to say, I quickly became an anxious stress ball. It negatively impacted my sleep and my mental health in general. My heart would race with each and every push notification. It would be like, bing! What was this it? Would this be the tweet announcing the start of World War III? I was doom scrolling like a motherfucker. And whether it's to follow war, climate change, or pick your disaster, I know I'm not alone. A 2024 survey found that 31% of American adults engage in doom scrolling regularly. That number jumps up to 46% for millennials, hey, that's me, and 53% of Gen Z. And none of it is good for us. The American Brain Foundation noted that, quote, constant negative stimuli can negatively affect your mental health. And that makes sense to me, because I never feel better after a fresh batch of doom scrolling. I always have to pull myself out of it as if I was about to be trapped in the sunken place from Get Out. My doom scrolling is well-intentioned. I want to be informed. But if I'm honest with myself, doom scrolling doesn't make me that much more informed. I might be able to recall certain facts in the moment, but once the next disaster strikes and my algorithms shift, my brain makes room for a fresh dose of calamity. And that's why I've decided to swap out my doom scrolling for escapism. Escapism generally gets a bad rap. Oxford defines it as, quote, the tendency to seek distraction and relief from unpleasant realities, especially by seeking entertainment or engaging in fantasy. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I'm not saying we should bury our heads in the sand, but I don't think hyper-focusing on unpleasant realities is good for us. Johnny Harris, who's a wildly popular YouTube journalist, touched on this during his Subway Takes appearance.
So what's your take?
I think people should stop consuming the news.
And to make his point, he asked what we learn by reading the headlines every day and how we feel afterwards. The answer? Horrible.
What do you learn from the headlines every day?
War. Climate crisis.
Yes.
Nuclear.
How do you feel afterwards?
Horrible.
Yes.
But the host, Kareem, says he does it because he feels like he needs to be an informed human being. Which, to be fair, is how I think most of us who regularly read news headlines tend to feel. Johnny contends that the news, especially the 24-hour news cycle, is showing us how the world doesn't work, and is primarily motivated to make us feel angry, scared, and overwhelmed. Well, mission fucking accomplished, news. Well done! Johnny's solution to this is to consume slower journalism that offers analysis about how the world actually works.
There's journalism, often analysis or weekly stuff, slower stuff, that teaches you how the world actually works. It gives you theories to understand how things work. If you just read the headlines, you're going to think that the world is all war and crisis.
True.
And turns out it's not. It's
True.
actually more complicated than that.
True, I can see this point.
If you're able to pull yourself away from your phone long enough to look, you can see that Johnny's onto something. So instead of soaking in every last headline or falling down a rabbit hole of despair, I think we should inject a little more escapism into our lives. And here's how I do it. Escapism is usually a negatively charged description for hobbies that the person using the word doesn't like or finds to be frivolous, as opposed to more serious pursuits like, I don't know, stock market stuff and fixing that gutter or whatever. Video games, comics, popcorn movies, and fantasy novels have at various points found themselves to be in the line of fire for charges of escapism. But I'd argue both that escaping into a video game or fantasy novel is a wonderful way to spend your time, and they're also not the only ways to escape. Traveling is escapism. you're most likely going on that beach vacation, or if you're like me, heading off into the mountains for an escape from the drudgery of everyday life. Unless you're reading the news headlines to help plan your next vacation, then you're escaping with travel. But of course you can't always travel every time that urge to pick up your phone and doom scroll strikes, so you have to have devices, metaphorical, not literal, to help wean yourself off those urges. For some, that simply means putting the phone in another room and picking up a book. For others, it means disappearing into an interactive fantasy world on the Switch 2. I dabble in all of the above, but I've recently picked up a new tool in my arsenal, and that is writing my own goddamn book. I've published and self-published nonfiction, but I've had this idea for a story that I've kept coming back to year after year. And I thought I got it out of my system when I wrote up as a screenplay a few years back. But besides not knowing what the hell to do with a screenplay, it came back to me as a graphic novel. So I wrote a graphic novel script. But I recently found that I still couldn't shake it. So when the urge to doom scroll started making my fingers twitch with the latest batch of wildfires, I decided to put my phone down, write up an outline, and start working on a blank draft for a novel. And at this point, I'm already about 100 pages in, chipping away day by day, and I've got samples out to test readers. Now, whenever I catch myself doom scrolling on the cusp of the sunken place, I get rid of my phone and open up my draft. And guess what? The story is largely inspired by the video games, comics, and movies of my childhood. All that pointless escapism is coming back to help me. That's of course not to say that escapism is only worthwhile if you're somehow productive with it. All these forms of escapist art can relax, inspire, motivate, or heal in their own way. Hell, I made a whole video on how I can draw a line from playing Zelda as a kid in suburban America to my ultra running and long distance hiking today. Or they can just be entertaining and make you laugh. It's okay to laugh. We don't need to be miserable 24/7 just because that's what the headlines are coaching us to do. By the way, if you're a fan of science fiction fantasy novels like Ready Player One or the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, and you like video games like The Legend of Zelda and Final Fantasy, and you're interested in being a test reader, let me know in the comments. When I started writing this, I tried to find another word with a more positive connotation than escapism. In doing so, I found this anecdote from C.S. Lewis in an essay called On Science Fiction. He wrote that, "People are so ready with the charge of escape, I never fully understood it till my friend, Professor Tolkien, asked me the very simple question, what class of men would you expect to be most preoccupied with and most hostile to the idea of escape?" And gave the obvious answer, jailers. So don't let the jailers win, people. Escape while you can. Let me know in the comments how you tried to escape from the doom and gloom, and as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.